The signals had been coming from somewhere beyond human space for 3 months. Commander Teo stood in the observation deck of the exploration ship Pathfinder and watched the stars. His hands were rough from years of military service, and his eyes held the weight of every decision he had ever made. He was not the kind of man who believed in coincidences. Dr. Hai Jin approached him quietly. She was one of the few people on the ship who could move without Teo noticing, but he had learned to expect her presence. Her mind was faster than most people's hands. She carried a data tablet, and her expression told him the news was important. "The signals are not random," she said without greeting. This was how they worked together. No wasted words. Teo turned to face her. "Show me." The tablet displayed waves of light and sound, patterns that human instruments had picked up from deep space. Hai-Jin moved her fingers across the screen, highlighting sections. "See here? This repeats every 4 hours, and this section, it is mathematical. Prime numbers in sequence. Someone out there is trying to be found." The commander felt something shift inside his chest. Humanity had sent the Pathfinder out to explore the edges of known space. They were not looking for civilization. They were not even sure what they were looking for, but here it was, calling to them from the darkness. "Where?" Teo asked. 140 light-years from Earth. We can be there in 6 months if we push the engines." Teo looked back at the stars. 6 months of travel, 6 months of not knowing what they would find. It was a risk, but he had built his entire life on understanding when risks were worth taking. This was one of them. "Wake the council," he said. "Tell them we are changing course." The ship's council met in the central conference room. 20 people sat around a long table, each one the best at what they did. Engineers, scientists, medical officers, and soldiers. Teo explained what Hai-Jin had discovered. He watched their faces change as they understood the meaning. Somewhere in the darkness, something intelligent was calling out. Not everyone agreed that they should answer. "We could be flying into a trap," said Commander Park, head of security. "We know nothing about what is out there. It could be hostile." "It could be anything," replied Hai-Jin. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were alive with excitement. "We will never know if we do not go." The debate continued for 2 hours. In the end, Teo made the decision. They would follow the signals. They would meet whatever civilization had sent them, but they would go prepared. All weapon systems were brought to full readiness. Extra guards were assigned to critical areas. The ship was ready for anything. For 5 months and 28 days, nothing changed. The signals continued their steady pattern. The ship traveled through empty space, moving faster than anything humanity had built before. The crew fell into routine. Sleep, work, exercise, eat, sleep again. The universe around them stayed the same, black and vast and silent. Then they arrived. The signals had been coming from beyond a small system with 3 planets. But what the Pathfinder found was not a planet. It was a station. No, not a station, a city. A city that floated in space, massive beyond imagination. It was made of metal and light, and it was so large that Earth could have fit inside it several times over. And around this floating city were ships, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, each one different, each one belonging to a different species. Hai-Jin's voice was shaking when she reported what she saw. "Teo, I am reading life signs, many different kinds of life signs. The technology here is... I do not even have words. Thousands of years ahead of us, maybe millions." Commander Teo felt his heart slow down. This was the moment he had trained for his entire life. This was the moment that changed everything. "Take us in slowly," he commanded. "Full peaceful approach protocol. All weapons powered down. Send a greeting message on the frequencies they used to call us." The Pathfinder moved forward like a small bird approaching a mountain. The floating city grew larger and larger on the screens. Teo could see now that it was not just one structure, but many structures connected together. Gardens floated between towers. Water flowed through the empty space. It was beautiful in a way that made him feel small. A response came to their greeting message. It was in human language. English. Perfect English. Welcome, Earth vessel. You are the first humans to reach the Galactic Council in recorded history. You may approach the docking station. Come unarmed. Come in peace. We have been waiting. Waiting. The word seemed impossible. How could anyone have been waiting for them? Humanity had only discovered space travel 400 years ago. The universe was ancient. How could they be expected? But as Teo sat in the command chair and watched the Pathfinder move toward the great station, he understood something. This was not an accident. The signals had been too clear, too easy to follow. The message had been too simple to decode. Someone had wanted humanity to find them. The question was why. As the ship approached the docking ring, Teo saw something that made him stand up from his chair. In the great hall that stretched before them, there was a vast circular table. Hundreds of seats surrounded it. Representatives from 1,000 different species stood or sat or floated at those seats. They were tall and short, with skin of every color, with tentacles and wings and forms that human minds struggled to understand. But one seat was empty, one single seat, positioned exactly in front of the Pathfinder's view. "Sir," Heijin whispered beside him, "that seat. I have seen it in the old records, the ancient stories. It is called Earth's Seat." Teo stared at that empty chair. He did not know what it meant. He did not know what was about to happen. But as he prepared to lead the first human team onto that impossible station, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The ship locked into the docking port with a soft metallic sound. Around them, the greatest minds in the galaxy waited to see what humanity would do next. Minister Jiwoo had negotiated with criminals, business leaders, and politicians her entire life. She was trained to read faces, to find the weakness in every argument, and to walk into any room like she owned it. But nothing had prepared her for the moment she stepped into the council chamber of the Galactic Assembly. The beings around her were not human. They were not even close to human. One creature looked like a floating jellyfish made of pure energy. Another was a massive insect with 6 arms, each one moving with perfect precision. There were creatures that seemed to be made of crystal, others that were just shapes in the air that she could barely see. And they were all staring at her. "Welcome, Minister Jiwoo," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The speaker was a being that looked almost human, except that his skin was a deep blue and his eyes had no pupils. His name was Counselor Darien, and he had been the one to greet the Pathfinder. "The Earth delegation is complete. We have much to discuss." Jiwoo stepped forward and took the seat that had been prepared for her. Commander Teo sat to her left, and beside him was Admiral Ki Sung, the commander of Earth's military forces. Young scholar Min Seok sat to the right, still looking amazed by everything around him. Min Seok had been chosen for his ability to learn languages at incredible speed. In 3 months on the station, he had already learned to speak 5 different alien languages well enough to hold conversations. "We are honored to be here," Jiwoo began. She had prepared this speech during the entire journey. "Earth comes to the Council in friendship. We seek knowledge, partnership, and a place among the civilizations of the galaxy." "Earth comes to us with nothing," said another voice. This speaker was a tall, thin being with skin like gray metal. His name was Vexthar, and he represented the Merchant Collective. "You bring no technology that is not already 1,000 years out of date. You bring no resources of value. You have no influence, no power, and no history with our council. Why should we care that you have arrived?" The question hung in the air. Jiwoo did not hesitate. This was a test, and she had expected it. "Because," she said calmly, "someone left an empty seat for us." Silence fell over the council. Even the creatures that had been moving their limbs or tentacles or appendages stopped. Counselor Darian's face showed something that might have been surprise or perhaps respect. "Earth's seat," said a crystal-like being whose voice was beautiful and terrible at once. "It has been empty for over 2 million years. We did not speak of it to your species. How do you know of it?" Min Seok stood up. His voice was quiet, but everyone listened. "Our scientist, Dr. Hai Jin, found records in our oldest stories, stories that should not exist, stories that talked about a great table, about different peoples coming from the stars, and about a seat that waited for children of Earth. We thought they were myths, but we came to look for the signals, and we found this." Over the next 3 days, the negotiations began in earnest. Different species wanted different things from humanity. The Merchant Collective wanted to buy human art and music, which they found strangely beautiful. The crystal beings offered to share their knowledge of mathematics and physics. The jellyfish creature wanted to study human emotions, which it said were unlike anything it had encountered in 2,000 years. But beneath these friendly exchanges, Jiwoo could feel the tension. There were politics here. Factions. The council was not united about humanity. Late on the third night, Counselor Darian visited Jiwoo in her private quarters. He came alone, which broke about 15 different protocols that the other council members had explained to her. "You are clever," Darian said without greeting. "You understood immediately that Earth's seat meant something. Most young species would have missed the significance." "What does it mean?" Jiwoo asked. "And please, speak plainly. I am tired of games." Darian moved to the window that looked out at the vast council station. "Millions of years ago, there was a great civilization. The architects, we called them. They built this station, and they created Earth's seat as a reminder. The architects were powerful, and the galaxies were peaceful under their rule. But something came. Something from the darkness beyond. Something that we do not fully understand." "What happened to them?" "They vanished," Darian said simply. "All of them in a single day. The station was found empty, and Earth's seat was all that remained of their memory. For millions of years, the Council has debated what to do with that seat. Some wanted to remove it. Others wanted to wait for the day that a new species would be worthy enough to fill it." "And which side are you on?" asked Jiwoo. Darian turned to face her. "I am on the side that remembers, the side that knows the darkness is coming back, and the side that believes humanity, despite your youth and your chaos, might be the only species young enough and brave enough to survive it." The words should have been frightening. Instead, they excited Jiwoo. This was a puzzle, and she had always been good at solving puzzles. "Others do not agree with you," she said. It was not a question. "No," replied Darian. "Many in the council fear what humanity represents. You are unpredictable. You make decisions based on emotion as well as logic. You are willing to take risks that older species consider suicide. For millions of years, the council has been peaceful and orderly. Humanity threatens that order." Admiral Ki Sung came to Jiwoo the next day with troubling news. His sensors had picked up unusual activity in the lower levels of the station. Equipment was being moved. Energy signatures that looked like weapon systems were being assembled in areas that were supposed to be off-limits. "Someone is preparing for something," Ki Sung said, "and I do not think it is a warm welcome." Jiwoo knew then that the real game had begun. The Galactic Council was not going to make a decision about humanity sitting around a peaceful table. Instead, there would be hidden battles, political moves, and tests. She would need to find allies. She would need to prove that humanity deserved a place at that table. Min Seok approached her with news of another kind. The young scholar had been exploring the Council's ancient database, learning everything he could about the history of the galaxy. He had found something strange, records of civilizations that had held special seats at the council, records of them being powerful, records of them being needed, and then records of them simply ending, completely and without explanation. Every major civilization that we have data for, Minsok explained, everyone that had a special position at the council, they all disappeared at different times in history. The last one was 3 million years ago. Minister Jiwoo, I think Earth's seat was not created as an honor. I think it was created as a what? Asked Jiwoo. As a position for species that the council was waiting for species that they would need, species they were preparing for something. Jiwoo looked out the window at the great station, at the hundreds of alien ships, at the vast and complicated civilization that surrounded them. Humanity had come to the stars looking for knowledge and peace. But it seemed the stars had been waiting for them for a very different reason, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the station, something was moving closer, something that had no knowledge of the council's plans, or humanity's arrival, or the ancient seat that waited to be filled. Dr. He-jin had always known that the most important discoveries came from asking the right questions. On her 5th month at the council station, she finally asked the question that changed everything. "Why are there no records?" she asked Counselor Darien during one of their regular meetings. "Every civilization that reaches a certain level of technology keeps detailed records of their entire history. But the data about the civilizations that held special seats, there is almost nothing. It is like someone deleted entire centuries from the historical files." Darien's blue face showed no emotion, but his eyes flickered. It was a small sign, but Hyjin had learned to read the alien expressions. She had learned that every species, no matter how different, showed surprise in similar ways. "You are more observant than I expected," he finally said. "This is good. You will need that skill." Within 2 days, Hyjin had assembled a team. Operative Yuna was chosen from Admiral Ki Sung's security forces. She was young, brilliant with weapons, and she had a logical mind that worked well with science. The two women had developed a friendship based on mutual respect. They understood each other without needing many words. Darien gave them access to something called the Archive, an ancient storage facility that had been hidden deep in the outer rings of the council station. It required 5 different security codes to open, and the door itself was made of materials that Hyjin's instruments could not even identify. Inside, everything was different from the main station. The technology was older, but it was more refined, more perfect. It was the kind of technology that comes from understanding the universe at a level that modern civilizations had not yet reached. The walls were covered in symbols that shifted and changed, displaying information in ways that human eyes could barely process. The central chamber contained a massive structure that looked like a giant crystal. When Hyjin touched it, everything changed. The crystal came to life with light. And suddenly they were not in a physical archive anymore. They were inside pure information. They could see records, histories, scientific data, all flowing around them like a river of knowledge. "This is the repository of the architects," said a voice that seemed to come from the very structure itself. It was calm, ancient, and profoundly sad. "I am the archive consciousness. I have been waiting for someone to ask the right question." Yuna had her hand on her weapon, but Hyjin raised her hand to stop her. "Show us," Hyjin said. "Show us what you have been waiting to tell." The archive showed them. The architects had been the first true masters of the galaxy. They had built the council station as a place where all intelligent species could meet and solve problems together. For millions of years, their civilization had grown stronger and more peaceful. They had shared their knowledge. They had created laws that made war impossible. They had achieved something that most species only dreamed about: perfect order and harmony. But then something came. The archive showed images of darkness moving through space. Not darkness that was the absence of light, but darkness that was actively consuming light. Energy, matter, entire stars were disappearing into it. Whatever it was intelligent. It moved with purpose. And it was headed directly toward the center of the galaxy where the architects had built their greatest cities. The architects fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were incredible. They used physics that humanity would not understand for thousands of years, but it did not matter. The darkness consumed their weapons, consumed their ships, consumed their people. In the end, only the archive itself remained, hidden deep in a protected chamber containing the last records of their entire civilization. "Why are you showing us this?" He-Jin whispered. "Because the darkness is returning," the archive said. "Every few million years it comes. It follows the same pattern each time. It destroys civilizations. It moves through the galaxy slowly, consuming everything in its path. When it comes, I have been programmed to wake and to prepare a species that might be able to survive it." "The architects left us as a weapon," Yuna said quietly. "The architects left you as hope," the archive corrected. "Many civilizations have tried to fight the darkness. All of them failed, but the architects believed that a young species, one that had not yet been limited by tradition, one that could think in new ways, might have a chance. They called this species the Inheritors. Earth's seat was meant for the Inheritors." The archive showed them the mathematical models. The darkness was returning. It had been detected on the outer edge of the galaxy, moving slowly inward. Based on its speed, it would reach the center of the galaxy in approximately 10 years. 10 years. It was not much time. "We have to tell the Council," He-Jin said. "No," the archive replied. "The Council knows. Some Council members know. They have known for millions of years. They have been waiting for the right species to arrive before they told the truth. They were waiting for you." He-Jin and Yuna looked at each other. Everything suddenly made sense. The empty seat, the political tension, the careful tests that the Council had been giving to humanity. They were preparing, they were hoping, and they were terrified. "How much time do we have?" He-Jin asked. 9 years and 9 months, said the archive. "When the darkness reaches the outer rim of this station, the Council will lose all communications with the outer galaxies. When it reaches this station itself, in exactly 10 years, every civilization in this star system will die unless they can discover how to stop it." The two women were gathering data, filling their portable devices with all the information the archive could transfer, when the alarms began. The entire station shook. Red lights flashed throughout the archive chamber. "The Council is becoming aware of your actions," the archive said. "Some members believe you should not know this truth. You must leave now." Yuna grabbed He-Jin's hand and pulled her toward the door. Behind them, the archive began to shut down, systems locking, sealing the knowledge away again. As they ran through the corridors of the outer ring, the ceiling began to collapse. Someone was trying to stop them. Someone did not want this information to reach humanity. They made it to the corridor with seconds to spare, diving through the closing door as metal and stone fell behind them. An entire section of the archive was now sealed off, probably forever. "We need to get to Minister Ji-woo," He-Jin said, her breathing heavy. "We need to tell her everything." But as they ran through the station corridors, they heard something that made them stop. Alarms were sounding throughout the entire council chamber. The Great Assembly was being called to emergency session. Something was happening, something important. When they finally reached the Central Council area, they found Minister Ji-woo, Commander Tae-oh, and Admiral Ki-sung already there. The entire council was gathered, and floating in the center of the chamber was an image, a hologram of something massive moving through space. The darkness was not moving slowly anymore. Something had changed. It had accelerated. It was going to reach the galaxy in less than 2 years instead of 10. The time for preparation was over. The time for survival had begun. The emergency session lasted for 18 hours without break. Species that had been at peace with each other for millions of years suddenly remembered ancient grievances. Some wanted to run and hide in distant parts of space. Others wanted to negotiate with the darkness, as if negotiation would matter to something that consumed entire civilizations for food. Minister Jiwoo watched the chaos with a clear mind. This was not unlike the political battles on Earth, just played out on a much larger scale. What was needed was not more argument, but action. What was needed was leadership. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber. No one had invited her to speak. No human had ever done this in the history of the council. But the room fell silent anyway, waiting to hear what the young representative from the young species would say. "The darkness is coming," Jiwoo said simply. "You can run and it will chase you. You can hide and it will find you. Or you can stand together and fight. And maybe, just maybe, you will survive." "You are naive," said Vexthar the merchant. "We have tried to fight it before. It cannot be stopped." "Then we will try in a new way," replied Jiwoo. She turned to Commander Teo. "Commander, what do you think? Can we win?" Teo understood what she was doing. She was putting the choice in his hands, letting the council see that humanity could make decisions, could take responsibility, could lead. He stood and joined her in the center of the chamber. "We do not know if we can win," he said. "But I know that if we do not try, we will definitely lose. I am offering Earth's military expertise to the Council. I am offering every soldier, every strategy, every tool that humanity has. We will stand with you." Something shifted in that moment. A young species, just arrived from the darkness of space, was volunteering to defend civilizations they had just met. It was not logical. It was not strategic. It was emotional and human and brave, and it was exactly what the galaxy needed. Counselor Darien stood up. "I propose that Commander Teo be given authority over a unified military command. All species that wish to fight must place their weapons under his direction. All resources must be made available to the defense effort." The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity now had official control of the galaxy's military response. Over the next 15 months, the transformation was remarkable. Humans spread throughout the Council Station and across the galaxy, taking on roles that no one had thought possible for them. Admiral Ki Sung organized the military fleets. General Sumi, the fiercest warrior that Earth had sent, began training soldiers from 100 different species in unconventional combat tactics. Engineers worked alongside the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, redesigning weapons, improving defenses, and building new technologies. But there was resistance. The traditionalist faction, led by the crystal-like being named Velmorax, believed that humans were too young, too untrustworthy. They sabotaged equipment. They withheld information. They worked to undermine Teo's authority at every opportunity. One day, a convoy of weapons was destroyed before it could reach the defensive line. 3 ships carrying ammunition and supplies simply disappeared. Admiral Ki Sung investigated and found evidence pointing to sabotage. Jiwoo called an emergency council session. She presented the evidence calmly and clearly. "Someone does not want us to prepare. Someone wants us to fail." Velmorax stood up, his crystal form reflecting the light in beautiful and terrible colors. "The accusations are groundless. Perhaps humans are simply too primitive to handle advanced weaponry." "Perhaps," said Jiwoo coldly, "or perhaps some of you are too afraid to admit that we need to work together. Here is what I propose. Any species that does not contribute fully to the defense will receive no protection when the darkness arrives. You will be left to face it alone. It was harsh. It was the kind of ultimatum that younger species were not supposed to give to older ones. But it worked. The Council voted to remove Velmorax and other traditionalists from decision-making positions. The unified effort became truly unified. The work was intense and often seemed impossible. The darkness was moving faster than expected. The ships that had been predicted to reach the defensive line in 2 years might arrive in 18 months. Sometimes Teo would work for 30 hours without sleep, planning strategies, coordinating across different species, trying to figure out how to defend the indefensible. Dr. He Jin was assigned to a new research center, leading a team that studied the nature of the darkness. She was working with physicists from species that had evolved in ways so different from humans that they barely shared any common understanding of reality. Yet somehow, through mathematics and observation and desperate creativity, they began to understand patterns in how the darkness moved and fed. It is not just destroying randomly, He Jin told Teo during one of their briefing sessions. It is choosing targets. It is consuming in a pattern. If we understand the pattern, we might be able to predict where it will go next. We might be able to set a trap. Minseok had become invaluable as a translator and cultural bridge. He worked with species from hundreds of different worlds, helping them understand each other, helping humans understand them, translating not just languages but entire ways of thinking. On the morning that the first defensive weapons came online, Counselor Darien visited Teo in his command center. The station had been transformed into a fortress. Weapons systems covered every surface. Shields protected every vital section. It was beautiful and terrible to see. "You have done something remarkable," Darien said. "You have unified the galaxy against a common enemy." "We have not won yet," Teo replied. "We are just getting ready for the fight." "No," said Darien. "Winning starts before the battle. Winning is making a choice to fight. Winning is unity when everyone wants to run. You have already won the most important victory." The darkness was now visible to the naked eye on the telescopes. It looked like a storm, a vast churning storm made of shadow and consumed stars. It was beautiful in a way that made humans want to weep. It was terrible in a way that made them want to flee. But they would not run. They would stand. Teo looked at the image on his screens and thought about Earth. He thought about the people there who had sent him to explore the stars. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that their species had been chosen for this moment. They had no idea that within a few months, the darkness would reach Earth's sky and everything they knew would change forever. But he also knew something else. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. They had always found ways to survive, to adapt, to overcome. And now, with the greatest minds in the galaxy working beside them, with the ancient knowledge of the archive to guide them, they had a chance. It was a small chance. It was a desperate chance. But it was a chance, and that, Teo believed, was all that any species could hope for. The battle began on a day that was like any other day in the galaxy, which made it all the more terrible. The darkness did not announce itself with fanfare. It simply arrived, crossing the final defensive line that had been established by the Council's combined forces. General Sumi stood in the command center aboard the flagship, watching as the first wave of ships collided with the darkness. They did not explode. They did not engage in combat. They simply ceased to exist. The light that was being emitted from their engines blinked out. The electromagnetic signals from their communication system stopped. They were there, and then they were not. "All forward positions reporting losses," called out one of the tactical officers. He was a being made of crystalline structures, but his hands shook as he delivered the message. Fear, Sumi realized, was universal. "Begin defensive maneuver Alpha," she commanded. Her voice was calm, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding like a war drum. "All ships fall back to secondary line, use the asteroid fields for cover, make it pay for every inch." This was what they had trained for. This was the moment when humanity's unconventional thinking would be tested. The darkness moved through space like water, consuming everything, but it moved slowly. That was its only weakness. It could not be rushed, and if it could not be rushed, it could be delayed. It could be frustrated. It could be made to work harder than it expected. Sumi's strategy was to never fight the darkness directly. Instead, she created obstacles. Asteroid fields were positioned to slow its advance. Ships were sent in waves, not to defeat the darkness, but to understand it, to learn its patterns, to gather data. Each wave of ships that launched was soldiers volunteering to sacrifice themselves so that the galaxy could learn. Commander Teo had to make a decision that haunted him for the rest of his life. The data showed that if they threw everything at the darkness at once, they might slow it down, but they would also die. All of them. The galaxy would fall completely and utterly, but if they used the sacrificial strategy, if they sent soldiers to die in waves so they could learn the enemy's patterns, they might survive. He chose survival. And he lived with the knowledge that thousands of soldiers died because of that choice. But it was working. Dr. He-Jin and her research team began to see the pattern more clearly. The darkness was not one thing. It was many things, working together, almost like individual cells in a vast organism. Each cell consumed energy, but if you attacked them in the right way, if you disrupted the harmony between the cells, they could be separated. "They are communicating," He-Jin reported. "There is quantum entanglement between the cells. That is how they coordinate. If we can sever that entanglement, we can break apart the darkness." "How?" asked Teo. "I do not yet know," admitted He-Jin. "But I am working on it." Captain Ji-Ho was one of humanity's greatest pilots. She was young, brilliant, and willing to do things that other species' pilots would never attempt. When He-Jin announced that they needed to launch a probe into the very center of the darkness, Ji-Ho volunteered immediately. "No," said Admiral Ki-sung when he heard. "It is suicide. The darkness will consume any ship that enters it." "Probably," said Ji-Ho. She was calm. She had made peace with the possibility of death. "But the probe is small. It is fast. If I time it right, if I account for every variable, I might be able to get in and out." Might. That was all the galaxy had to work with. Might. Maybe. Perhaps. Ji-Ho launched from the flagship in the smallest, fastest ship in the entire galactic fleet. She moved toward the darkness like a bird diving into a storm. The sensors showed her moving deeper and deeper into the shadow, and then, for a terrible moment, the sensors lost her. But she came out the other side. The data she brought back was exactly what He-Jin needed. In the center of the darkness, there was a structure, an anchor point, something that was controlling the entire organism. It was not on the outer edge of the galaxy where it was consuming ships. It was in the very heart of the darkness, protected, central, vital. "If we can destroy that," said He-Jin, "we can break apart the entire attack." "How do we reach it?" asked Teo. "No ship can survive in the darkness long enough to reach that point." Counselor Darien stepped forward. He had been quiet throughout the entire battle, but now he spoke. "I will go." Everyone turned to look at him. An ancient alien. A being who had lived for millions of years, who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who had knowledge that no one else possessed. "Counselor, you cannot," said Ji-Woo. "We need your leadership." "What you need," replied Darien, "is victory. And for that you need time. The creature in the center of the darkness can be reached, but it will take someone who understands the nature of ancient things." Someone who remembers when it last came. Someone who can speak to it in the language it understands. Darien took a small ship and flew toward the darkness. They watched on the sensors as he descended into the shadow. And deeper. Deeper than any ship had ever gone. Until he reached the anchor point. What happened next would be studied by historians for millions of years. Some said Darien tried to negotiate, others said he fought. The truth was probably some combination of both. But as he reached that central point, the structure began to destabilize. The quantum entanglement that held the darkness together started to fail, and then, in a massive cascade of energy, the center of the darkness collapsed inward. The cells that made up the organism, suddenly uncoordinated, began to fall apart. The darkness that had seemed so invincible, so unstoppable, became just scattered pieces of void drifting through space. The battle was not over. The remaining pieces of the darkness still threatened the galaxy, but for the first time, it was possible to see the end. For the first time, humanity could believe that they might actually survive. General Sumi pressed the offensive. She coordinated with Captain Jiho, who flew incredible maneuvers to isolate pieces of the darkness. She worked with Admiral Ki Sung to position ships that could destroy the isolated pieces with ancient weapons that humans had learned to modify in new ways. For 3 months, the battle continued. Thousands of ships were lost. Thousands of soldiers from hundreds of different species died. But the darkness continued to fragment, and the fragment continued to weaken, until finally, there was nothing left. No darkness, no ancient threat, no impossible enemy consuming the stars. The galaxy had survived, humanity had survived. And in the wreckage of the battle, in the space where the darkness had been, the greatest military commander the galaxy had ever known stood on the bridge of his flagship and wept, not from joy, but from the weight of all the soldiers who had died to make this victory possible.